Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dillon, I'm your host, and today we are talking about productivity. We're going to define productivity, what it means, and how you can get more done for the inputs that you make on your projects. Now, I can talk about productivity not only because I've done $1 billion worth of construction, but for the last 6 years, I've been dedicated to improving and harnessing the production power that is embedded within Revit. At Cowabunga Studios, we develop software to make your life easier when using Revit. And now we're going to harness that in a whole different way where we're not actually going to sell software, but we'll talk about that later. So productivity, that's what today's episode is all about, is productivity, how to become more productive. What are the biggest companies in the world doing to be more productive, and how you and your firm can do the same. So productivity gets thrown around a lot. It's a word that's used often, and you might have it in your head as getting things done. While that's partially correct, it's not the whole picture. First, let us start with a dictionary definition. I find that's a pretty good place to begin. The rate of output for unit rate of input. That's the definition of productivity. The rate of output for unit rate of input. Initially, like a lot of terms that derive from farming, the amount of corn harvested per acre. The inputs are seeds, fertilizer, diesel fuel, time, and water. Converting these items to dollars so that we work in constant values. At the end of the harvest, when the crop is sold, we can tell if a profit was made. The dollar out is greater than the dollar in. Again, everything gets converted to dollars so that we have a constant value unit to compare. We can also do the same thing, and we do the same for our construction projects in a lot of ways. You input time, money, resources to winning a project. Then you invest more time, money, and resources to completing the project. When you add all this up, what it takes to win and what it takes to execute the project, you want all the inputs to be less than the output. The difference is profit, right? All the inputs, the sum total of all energy, effort, time, material, money, resources, everything that you do needs to be less than the money you got for doing that project, because that difference, that delta, that is profit. And we want a lot of profit. So when we think of productivity, we really also need to think of time and energy. Often this really gets forgotten or left out, especially if you just have salaried employees. We aren't necessarily looking at the effort it takes in proposals and putting a proposal together and going and presenting to clients, to prospective clients, to win that project. Everything that we need to do in prep time, drive time, all the costs associated with winning a project, we have to look at and also embed those costs into our proposal dollars. So something that often gets overlooked or forgotten is that effort time on the upfront needs to also be included in the projects that you do win. So when you read all these productivity books and getting things done and how to get things done, you'll find it's about maximizing your output for a given unit of input. Again, pretty simple stuff when you boil it down. And when you convert all those resources into dollars so that you have a constant unit to compare, you aren't going to have to think about what a bushel of corn costs or what a gallon of diesel fuel costs or what a gallon of water is, right? Like, again, going back to the farming analogy. In our pieces, you aren't going to think about what a Revit license is or what a computer costs, right? Or cloud computing or credits or whatever other input costs that we might have. So again, we want to convert everything to constant dollar units. So productivity is also about maximizing your energy, right? Output per unit input. If we take a constant hour in a time period, we want to get the most out of that time period. Well, the only way that we could do that is if our energy levels are at the highest. You know, when you're able to work on the same thing over and over and over again, you get better at doing that thing. So then you get more out of the time that you've put into it, which means that you're going to be able to produce more in a given unit of time. Your productivity, your output will be greater and higher. So you can increase the value of every hour, right? If before you could only get, say, 1,000 square feet done, now you get 2,000 square feet done. Well, you've just doubled your output, your productivity in that same time period, which compounds your abilities and you're able to value your hour at a higher rate. But you can personally, so I'm going to break this down as we move forward through this into kind of two categories, personal and professional. And the reason that I want to bring the personal side into this is it's something that each of us can do in different levels, and things that I have done and am doing at different levels to gain and buy back my time. So you can personally gain more hours by hiring out tasks that you don't enjoy but have to do. Some of these would be like grocery shopping, meal prep, cooking, cleaning, dishes, laundry, lawn care. Um, for all this stuff, really for being a human, right? Human stuff. So grocery shopping, meal prep, laundry, cleaning up your food, doing dishes, all that is about 96 hours a month on average. And you can hire out all those tasks for about 1,500 bucks a month. Now, things like lawn care, babysitting, all those additional things are going to, mileage may vary, right? Cost may vary. Cost will vary depending on where you're at, what you're doing, what you're looking to outsource, how big a lawn you have, how many kids you have, all that kind of stuff. But for the basics of a person, it's about 1,500 bucks a month, which is 1,562 an hour. So we take 1,500 over 96 hours, so we get 1,562 an hour. So if we look at your firm, so that's on the personal side, right? That's the things that we can do to outsource, right? I've had a house cleaner, I've had people do yard work, right? That's super simple and easy. And we have the house cleaner come in and do normal house cleaning stuff every couple weeks, do dishes when they're there. Laundry, I've taken laundry to usually like a dry cleaners, and you just drop off, big hampers of laundry. They do it, give it back to you. It's all folded. You're good to go, right? Pretty simple and easy. Now, if we look at your firm, right, at your business, and again, I'm going to use engineering firms since that's the world that I come from. How many people are making $100,000 plus, but are doing $25 an hour tasks, right? So you have a $50+ an hour employee, and they're doing $25 or $50,000 a year tasks, right? They're doing things that are literally half. You could hire two people for them doing this one thing. And when you start to examine all the areas in your business where you have somebody who is really too highly paid to be doing that thing, and I'm not talking about the things that you need to do for culture and setting an example and having your executives take out the trash every once in a while or whatever, right? Those are culture type of things, which has its own value associated with it. But from a nuts and bolts, day in, day out execution, right? Like your presidents of your company, your executives should not be taking out the trash, right? That is not the best use of their time. So when you start to look around and examine all the areas of your company, what people are actually doing, you really see that this is probably area number one, especially in like engineering and architecture firms. People are doing tasks that are way below their dollar value, what they're worth. And that's just by the nature of what you pay them, right? You have somebody else that can do the same thing in drafting, modeling a building, and yet you have some of your highest paid people doing that activity. When really you should be having your highest skilled people, right? Again, using a design firm example, but this would translate to the field, to your foremans, your superintendents, your main guys, to where your main people should be setting standards, right? Making design decisions, making layout decisions, making all the big decisions that are going on to that project. where the guys kind of lower down the totem pole should be executing that work. So in the field, this might look like, hey, the foreman might be laying out where all the floor boxes go. They might have another guy do that. Or the foreman is making sure that the total station is set, all the coordinates are right, all that stuff's plugged in. Maybe they have somebody else do that. But basically making these kind of design decisions, if you will, these execution points, these schedules, these milestones, these things for the guys to do, laying them out, setting them to work, and letting kind of the apprentices, letting the young guys, letting that lower skilled labor, if you will, do that type of work, right? And letting the guys who have experience, who are more skilled, kind of help dictate what's going to be done, and then letting the guys that are green execute the work. It's basically what we're talking about. So, because at the end of the day, your top guys need to be training your staff, they need to be developing your staff, they need to be doing the highest value thing that they can do. One is replicating themselves, two is making critical decisions for people to execute out there in the field, because in business there is a winner and a loser for each and every project. All hours have a dollar cost associated with them. And every firm is ultimately competing for resources, meaning that the more productive you are, the more output you get for unit of input, the better off you're going to be. The more money you're going to have to do projects, the more projects you can win, the more money that you can then make, right? We go around and around in the circle of winning effectively, right? The more projects you do, the more that you win, the more that you win, the more that you can market, the more that you can market, the more that you win, the more that you win, the more that you have to market with, right? So long as you are profitable on each and every project, on each and every win that you make, right? Super big thing there. So we want to make sure that you are the most productive you can be, that your dollar goes the furthest on each and every project, and that you continually level up the tasks that you do personally, right? We want to, and again, this isn't like in the extreme cases of you literally don't have anybody do the work. I've been there, right? And this is probably one of the biggest things that most firms are ended up facing with, is that they just don't have the manpower to do the work. So you end up having your high skilled employees doing all this kind of low skilled labor because they're the only ones there to do it, and the job needs to be done. So in a perfect world, you would have those folks to do that. Again, it's a time in, time out kind of thing, right? And we want to again look at this in terms of energy levels. So for you personally, the highest value, the highest leverage tasks that you can do in a given day, you should do those when your energy levels are the highest, right? There's no sense in doing kind of menial, low level work when you have high energy levels, only to do the things that matter the most when your energy levels are the lowest, right? That is reducing your productivity. It is reducing your output per unit of input, right? Time. So we want to be conscious of all this on a personal level so that we can execute our best each and every day, right? Doing the things that matter the most for the business, for your job. Those things are super important. And then we want to look at, again, when we look at energy levels, we want to make sure that our people are doing tasks that really benefit them and things that give them the highest energy levels. So for somebody new, somebody green, doing drafting is like not that big a deal. It's new, it's exciting, they can do it, and it gets them through, right? But for those that are engineers, yeah, they need to have some drafting skills, maybe. Architects the same way, right? They probably should have an understanding of how the systems work, how the programs work, how to put that together, because it teaches them how design works and it brings them up through the ranks, right? That's effectively apprentice, journeyman, master electrician, right? That's all that we're looking to do here, is move them up, similarly to what a union would ultimately. So we want to make sure that we increase rank and status and all that kind of good stuff as we move them along. But for like your licensed professionals, right? Your licensed architects, your licensed engineers, they did that so that they wouldn't have to do all that drafting work, right? That they wouldn't have to model pipe and duct work and lights and receptacles and all this other stuff. Again, you kind of have to do some of these things sometimes to get the job done, but that's not what they want to be doing on a daily basis. They want to be doing calculations, solving problems, doing the big design work, not kind of stuck down in the details and code research, right? Like those are things that you can kind of somewhat offload, maybe not code research, but you want to be able to offload the tedious tasks to people within the organization that it's lower for that. And drafting ultimately is one of those key areas that you can ultimately just bring in a strategic partner to help you do this. And I want to make some clarifications here on like a partner and a vendor, right? A lot of people think that you just buy something from a firm, and this is really a short-term versus a long-term mindset item. Here on the construction corner, Matt, myself, like we think in long term, right? You've heard Matt talk for years about the team, right? And the team is not just the internal team, but the team of all the subcontractors and everybody that is associated with that project. And so we want to take this long term, that you're strategic partners with these people, right? You don't have profit share, anything like that. It's just, hey, you're coming together to solve a common mission, a common work on a common project for a common goal together. And you want to have these long-term values, these long-term visions, these long-term thought processes, and not just using somebody for the price that they can offer you on one project, right? That's not long-term thinking. So again, we're not a get what you pay for kind of thing. We want to have a partner who's in it for the long haul. So, and that you bring trust and all that good stuff that comes with a partner. So, with these strategic partnerships, you're really looking to kind of outsource some of these tasks that really you just don't have the team for. You don't want to be on that. And I'm going to explain why I kind of came to this conclusion after a ton of research, after countless hours in doing this, is and really just working in firms for years, being licensed, again, seeing $1 billion worth of projects go up. You kind of see things over time that really lead you to this kind of same conclusion, is that you ultimately need an entity to help you with this drafting thing. So like most engineering firms, most architecture firms, they don't have a top level brain power problem. They have a execute the project and get it on paper problem, right? They have an execution, a drafting problem. They don't have the people that understand and know Revit. They don't have the people to get it done. And so then they're top people because they are hard workers. They will do what it takes to get the job done. They end up spending countless hours in the office doing all of these projects. They end up working excessive hours and they end up burning themselves out. It's what we've seen across the industry for decades. So, and then you lose all the people at the bottom who could move up the chain, but they just don't want to come in and do drafting. So, like engineers go into another field, architects become owners reps. They just move somewhere else because they burn out in doing this tedious, mind numbing drafting work. And it's really been a problem across the industry. So, why would a firm decide to kind of outsource like drafting? And this led me down an interesting path of research to like, do the largest companies in the world outsource? Like, and what do they outsource, right? Do they have strategic partners in these areas? And who are they? So, shockingly, yes, like the largest companies in the world do outsource. They do have strategic partners, and it's for like key areas of the business, which was kind of shocking when you look at it. They just don't try to do it all. They focus on a few key elements, right? Like for in construction and design, it's design decisions, right? It's client interface. It's those big high level things, right? Writing out the like our SD narratives, right? Like those things, those are like the key decision points of a project. And then executing that, putting all the receptacles in, putting the lights, the ductwork, modeling all that, doing load calculations, all that stuff, while important and it needs to be done, it's not the big movers, right? Like what light fixture you pick is a bigger mover than putting the lights in the model. What cooling and heating systems you put in are bigger design decisions than putting all that in the model, right? Like we need to have people focused on those big high level engineering and architecture decisions. Like what does the front of the building look like? What is the shape of the building? How many stories is the building? Right? Those things matter a lot more than putting all the things on a drawing, right? But we've gotten stuck in this production mindset. So what are the big boys doing? What are the big companies in the world, the largest $1 trillion companies, which is incredible to say that there's like 4 or 5 companies that are 2, 3 trillion dollars, right? It's crazy. So Apple, Google, Microsoft, Johnson and Johnson, Nvidia, the list goes on. You can go down the top, probably 100 companies. I stopped at like 50. And I couldn't find a company that didn't outsource like major parts of its operations. It was, again, it's very shocking. Uh, but then again, that's why they became some of the biggest companies in the world. They are more productive with every dollar. Their mind and energy goes into solving a very few specific things. And they put something in and they allow people to be great at the things that they outsource. So then on the flip side, you look at engineering firms, architecture firms. The vast majority of them are small, right? They're not big. They're also trying to do it all, right? They don't outsource anything, right? Like you have a owner of a 30, 40, 50 person engineering firm, and they are like the chief engineer. They're the chief HR person. They're doing hiring and recruiting. They're like teaching seminars. They're doing marketing. They're doing proposals. They're doing drawing reviews. They're probably working on a project or two. Like, how do you have time to like eat or sleep or be with your family or like have a life, And I mean, I work a lot, but you just look across the industry and that's what we're having happen here is these guys are, chief head cook, chef, dishwasher, server, maitre d, uh, taking reservations. I mean, they're doing it all. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. They're not focused on anything. They're All of these firms are not bringing anybody to like help them market. They're not helping them draft. They're not helping them do their finance or accounting or HR and hiring and recruiting. Like they're all over the place and it's kind of crazy. So if you think of business as you have one constraint, one major constraint for the business, and until you remove that constraint, it's going to be stuck. It will not grow. And if you look then at every individual, right, we take that same principle, right? So your firm's not growing mainly because you're probably not marketing. You're not winning more projects. Pretty simple thing. Then you look at every person within the org, right? Are they maximizing their productivity, right? Do you really need to hire another person or like what is the product mix here? If we took drafting off some of these, could we have these other guys help in other areas and then our few key engineers do these things so then we could have a lean and mean team? Like is each person on your team getting the most output from every input? Are they getting the most out of every hour in the day? Or could they be doing higher level tasks, something worth more? Like, again, just all the drafting work. And the only reason you do this is because you trust your engineers, you trust them to do a good job, but it doesn't really make financial sense. So, the $1 million question here is ultimately like, why haven't you gone with a strategic partner? And by and large, the reason that you haven't gone with a strategic partner is because you don't know who to trust. You don't know who out there is basically only doing drafting, right? They're not going to come and steal your clients. They're not going to come and take your work, right? Because that's what everybody is worried about. So you want not another engineering firm, but you don't really trust drafting firms and you don't for sure trust anyone overseas. Like I don't either. So you want an American based company, but then you're worried about pricing because, that's crazy. So at the end of the day, like what would happen if you could add 20% to the bottom line of your company? What would happen if your engineers got all that drafting time back, right? Like that would be crazy. If they got all their drafting time back, you didn't have to worry about production issues, right? And getting drawings done. You could then, as a leader in your company, focus on going and getting more projects. You could focus on being with your clients so that they give you more projects. And because you had somebody to do all the production work and it's contractually bound, you had a fixed price. You're not going to have cost overruns. They're going to deliver on time, on schedule, on budget, because again, it's all fixed. Then you can deliver for your clients. They're going to be happy. Your clients are then going to hire you again because they're happy, right? And it spins the flywheel of a productive cycle. And all those engineers, instead of drafting, are now focused on more high level items, right? Again, design criteria, spending time with clients, winning more work. They're focused on QA, QC, picking up any changes or anything that came up in design conversations, all those little items. And so you spend about 70% of your time on a project in drafting, right? If 10% are like meetings and design criteria, 10% is like CA, doing that whole thing, and 10% is QA, QC, just in reviewing drawings, making sure things are going good, leaving like 70% of the time allocated to a project for actually just production drafting, right? Like that's drawing, modeling, content in Revit. So you outsource that 70% and you did that for even say 60% or 70% of the value, like it's 49% to the other firm, like gives you basically a 21% margin guaranteed. Like that, it's kind of crazy, right? And then whatever else you gain back in the other items. So for most firms, like you're making 10% or less, you can have a 21% margin that just doubled your profit at the end of the day, bottom line, without doing any more work, right? Doing the same level of projects that you've been doing, basically doubled the profit, reduce your workload. Like that's what a strategic partner can ultimately do for you, right? And then on top of that, it removes all those overhead costs. So if you don't have to hire any more drafters, maybe you get rid of a couple, like reduces all that overhead costs. Now you're not paying for any overtime, any healthcare costs, insurance, computers, hardware, licenses, Autodesk licenses, cloud licenses, any of the credits. You're not paying for more office space for that person to work in, monitors, like Teams accounts, Microsoft licenses, all that kind of stuff. And then when you do pay for that partner, right, they're only getting paid on the projects that they do. And it's a fixed fee. So now you don't, one, you don't carry any overhead costs. Two, when the projects are in a lull or you don't have projects, you're not carrying this huge overhead burden trying to find another project. You're only paying for the ones that you do. So, I mean, what most firms are always worried about or having layoffs is that they have this huge kind of overhead burden. So they need to win more projects for that. Well, now you just need to win the same number of projects in a given year. And if you win more, great. And then you have a production partner to handle that. So then it gets done. And again, all of your costs are fixed. You're not having to worry about the overhead burden. Your partner is now having to worry and deal with hiring and training and all that other stuff. Right. And again, you're just setting the like design criteria. You're making the important decisions. You're setting the pace for these guys. And all those like big firms, Apple, Nvidia, like those are two of the biggest companies in the world worth multiple trillions of dollars. And they outsource all of their manufacturing. Like Foxconn, all those partners make the phones for Apple. Apple does not manufacture a single device. Nvidia, who we know for graphics cards, they just design them, which is crazy when I look this up. Like Taiwan Semiconductor is who manufactures pretty much all of NVIDIA's chipsets, which is crazy when you think about it, right? They're worth multiple trillions of dollars and they're just designing it, right? And they have fab partners to manufacture and create the things that they think of and design, which is just absolutely insane. So the biggest companies in the world have strategic partners. They outsource some of the biggest portions of their company, Like it's just crazy. And then they do this also for like HR and recruiting and hiring. They do it for IT and their network infrastructure. They do it for finance and billing and payroll and all that kind of stuff. Like they outsource a ton. It's just crazy when I looked into this how much these companies like don't do themselves. They hire strategic partners. They hire people to do that, other companies that specialize in that very specific thing. They hire them to do that type of work. I mean, and we talk about specialists, right? Thing like being so great at your single thing. You can't be so great at marketing, so great at engineering, so great at hiring, so great at firing, so great at leading. Like that is a ton of skill sets wrapped into one single thing. Like we look at some of the greatest players in any given sport, like, but they're only great at that single sport. Like Michael Jordan, arguably one of the greatest or the greatest basketball player of all time, like couldn't he was not great at baseball. Like, I don't think anybody would really argue that. Like, he was not great at baseball, but he was the best at basketball, right? And so that is the power of focus and dedication to a single sport, to a single craft for a long period of time. So ultimately, what I'm getting at with this is in your firm and your company, like what would happen if your firm, if you were able to focus like solely on your clients and not worry about production work, focus on their needs and designs rather than worrying about the Revit model, right? Like, what would your company then look like? Where ultimately you still maintain all your design decisions, all of your design integrity is still there. Like you're still in charge. It's still your project. Your name is still on the drawings. Like you have all that still. You're taking responsibility for it. You're taking credit for all of it, but you did like none of the work. You made the big design decisions. You QA'd, QC'd it, and you spent time with your clients. Like hiring this stuff out and having a strategic partner dedicated to Revit production excellence, right? A firm that is just so dialed in on Revit production, modeling things, putting them in the model. Like that firm will not only be able to produce drawings better and faster than you, they're going to be able to do it for less, which is why like they could do it for say 60, 70% of whatever the project, fee allocation would be, right? So on $100,000 projects, you take off 30% off the top for all the things that matter, right? The design criteria, construction administration, and those things, QA, QC. And then you have 70% left in drafting. And then you take 70% down for that. So now you're down to like 49% of the project, to hire somebody for drafting. You keep the delta in there. So that's 21% from drafting from 70% of what it would take you. And then the 49 that it now takes somebody else. So you have 21% pretty much guaranteed margin within the production, and then anything that you make in the other areas. So that's pretty awesome to basically guarantee that you make money on each and every project by fixing the cost of the largest area of concern and the largest risk factor for you on your projects. So again, a firm dedicated to that production can do it faster, do it for less, because again, your team with all this production stuff has a ton on their mind, like engineering decisions, training and coaching new hires, right? Figuring out what they need. They've got client needs. They got their personal lives and whatever's going on there. Maybe kids' sports, PTA meetings, school, all this stuff, right? Life is busy. They have all these decisions to make. So if you take the biggest ones off their plate at work, their mind is going to be cleared to make better decisions on the things that matter, right? Priorities is what helps move a person forward faster. So you can keep your priorities in order and do those priorities in that order, right? Not by who's yelling louder. You're going to make huge, huge strides. And again, production is the thing where people yell louder. So when you take that off the plate, you take that off the table, you're going to do so much better. And again, that's why the largest companies in the world form these strategic partnerships with other companies to handle these large portions of their business so they can focus on a few core things, right? NVIDIA has thousands of engineers designing these boards and chipsets, right? To QA, QC them, to test them, to do all this stuff. And then when it goes to production, They have Taiwan Semiconductor to do all of that work in manufacturing and figuring out how a production line goes together and how to make these chips and what does this mean and how they procure all the materials and shipping and logistics and all this other stuff that Nvidia doesn't have to think about. Same with Apple, right? They have the partner in Foxconn to again procure and get all the raw materials, put them together, assemble them, and ship them to where they need to go. So Apple focuses on again the biggest decisions that they need to make so that the system works better. And this has really been the shift here for Cowabunga Studios. I've seen so many firms struggle with this one thing of productivity, of trying to get better. And us as an industry, were we work harder. We don't always work smarter. We don't take what is worked for these massive companies across the world, like the Apples, the Microsofts, again, the Fortune 500 of companies. Like they have these big strategic partnerships. They do a few things and they do them well. And when you start to have strategic partners, and this is again the thing that Cowabunga Studios we are shifting into and are in now, is being a strategic partner for drafting for MEP. And that is what we are going to do moving forward. And we're going to do it with software, we're going to do it with people, and be able to handle production for companies and do it in a way that helps everybody win. Because this is the biggest thing. And you look across all these construction companies, you look across what everybody is doing, they need to do a few core things, right? You look at a paper GC, the reason that they can do so much volume of work is because they do a few core things and they do it really, really well. They put costs together, cost estimates, they put schedule, they bring a team together, and then they have the team execute, right? They follow the plan. That's it. Like very simple business model. Not easy to execute, not easy to do, to bring a team together, to assemble all those parts. I mean, that is really the core emphasis of a strategic partnership. You be great at the one thing that you do. And yet we have all these other things that we're trying to do too. For firms, it's have some good accountants, some good finance people around you, have some good HR and recruiting people around you so that you can, again, attract great people to your team. Have some good marketing people around you so that you can, again, put out great marketing material and content for you and your company and win those projects that you want and deserve. Then, again, outsource something that is not like I said core function, but again, like Apple outsources manufacturing of the iPhone, which is like a core product for them. So, but yet they keep control of design criteria. They keep control of aesthetics and look and function. They keep prices down. Again, having somebody specialize in that. They're not spreading their focus and attention thin, which is what I see across a lot of the construction industry. We say, oh, that's not that hard. Let me just do that. Well, what else could you be doing in that same amount of time? Right now, you're thinking about this other thing. You're thinking about recruiting, or you're thinking about training the new people, or training module, or whatever else that you're trying to do. And so you have all these plates that you're spinning instead of bringing on people to help you, bringing on strategic partners to help you in all of these areas, right? IT, finance, accounting, HR, production, right? Like these are core things that can really help you and your firm grow. So that's what Cowabunga Studios is focusing on now, is MEP production. Feel free to reach out to me in the comments or my contact information below, Dillon@cowabungastudios.com, and be happy to talk with any of you guys on production and how we can help you on your Revit projects for MEP moving forward. So we've teamed up with a great mechanical and plumbing partner. Again, partnerships, right? Partnerships are key here to offer this turnkey service for you guys. So Thank you guys so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. And until next time, don't forget to be more productive.